You're watching the horror storytelling channel, where tales that seem born only of nightmares become reality. If you're someone who loves that eerie, ghostly, mostly, and mysterious feeling, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss any stories that'll make you glance over your shoulder every time you step into the dark. And now, let's listen to the story of a strange elevator in the heart of New York, where a single press of the button for the 13th floor might mean you'll never be yourself again, if you even make it back at all. Apartment building number 1432 in Manhattan isn't eye-catching. It doesn't carry the luxury of the towering glass skyscrapers, nor does it have the old charm of the brownstone rows lining the historic streets. It stands silently like a shadow, wedged between two taller buildings, its exterior paint peeling, its windows dusty and dim. If you ask the locals about it, most will avoid the name altogether. No one wants to talk about it. But everyone knows, if you have to live in New York and your money can't stretch far, 1432 is the last option and the riskiest bet, where you're staking your very existence. Alex moved in one early October afternoon when fog spilled down like thin gray smoke, curling around the legs of pedestrians. He was a freelance photographer, recently broken up, recently fired from a local newspaper, and needed somewhere to start over. Apartment 1432 fit perfectly within his tight, dwindling budget. Everything about the lease happened oddly fast. The landlord was an old man, his face wrinkled like a worn shirt, speaking in a hushed voice, as though each word he uttered came at a steep cost. "The 12th floor is the top," he emphasized as he handed Alex the key. "There is no 13th floor, so don't go looking for it." Alex chuckled, thinking it was just an old superstition. In New York, skipping the 13th floor in high-rise buildings isn't uncommon. But when he stepped into the elevator for the first time, something strange immediately caught his eye. The buttons were labeled from L to 12, just as the old man said. But between the 12 button and the emergency alarm, there was a narrow gap, a faint rectangular scratch, as if a button had once been there and had been forcibly removed. The first night passed uneventfully. Except for one thing, at exactly 3 a.m., Alex was woken by a metallic clanging sound from somewhere in the building. The noise was steady, prolonged, as if an elevator was moving, yet no one should have been using it at that hour, and he was the only new tenant on the 12th floor that week. The next morning, while buying coffee, Alex asked the doorman, a dark-skinned man whose face always looked damp with sweat, "Did someone go up last night?" The doorman glanced at him, eyes clouded with confusion and fear. "You heard something?" "The elevator. Someone going up and down around 3. The man didn't answer. He only nodded slightly, then turned away, as though that conversation was forbidden. From that night on, every evening at exactly 3 a.m., Alex heard the same sound. And then one Saturday night, when he returned from Central Park after shooting a series of nighttime light photos, the elevator opened for him without him pressing the button. The lights inside flickered, the control panel blinked in a strange, erratic way, and then a new button appeared. Right between the 12 button and the emergency button, there was a number 13 button. It wasn't a button fixed into the control panel, but looked as if someone had manually carved it in. The engraving was crooked, but the red light behind it still glowed clearly. Alex stared at it for a long time. He reached out to press it, but the elevator lights suddenly went out. The building gave a light shudder, as if someone from above had just jumped down onto an old wooden floor. Then the lights flickered back on, and the number 13 button had vanished. The next day, he tried asking a few neighbors. A middle-aged woman named Margaret, with blonde hair and thick makeup that seemed to hide something once visible beneath her skin, lowered her voice when he mentioned the 13 button. "If you see it, don't press it," she said, her hand trembling as she lifted a cigarette to her lips. "That floor isn't on any map. No one lives there. But sometimes the elevator still takes someone up, and they never come back." Alex let out a bitter laugh. "Probably just rumors. Every apartment building has stories like that, doesn't it?" Margaret didn't laugh. She walked away, and from that day on, never answered her door when he knocked again. But that button kept appearing. Not always, only exactly at 3 a.m., and each time it appeared, the sounds from above drew closer. It wasn't just mechanical noise anymore. There were footsteps scratching against the metal walls like someone was trying to slide down from the top of the elevator. By the third week, Alex was in a constant state of insomnia. He began attaching a GoPro camera inside the elevator, hoping to capture the moment the 13 button appeared. In the first video he reviewed, the one thing that made his skin crawl was the reflection in the elevator mirror. While he was bending down to adjust the camera, in the top corner of the screen, where there should have been nothing, a smeared pale face appeared. Eyeless, mouthless, noseless. It stared at him like a layer of stretched skin over an empty skull. Alex shut the camera off but couldn't sleep that night. He stayed awake, waited until exactly 3 a.m., then for the first time, stepped into the elevator and pressed the 13 button. The doors closed without a sound, without any mechanical noise. Everything was so silent he could hear his own heartbeat. The elevator lights shifted to a gloomy red and the elevator began to move, in no clear direction, not up, not down, just a floating sensation. When it stopped, the doors opened, and before Alex was a hallway covered in dust so thick that each step left an imprint like stepping on ash. No lights, no windows. The apartment doors on either side were tightly shut but not made of wood. They were rusted black metal like underground bunker doors. A chill crept across the floor, like something slithering close to the ground. Alex turned on his camera's flash, and the first thing he saw was a scrawled message, written either with a fingernail or some sharp object on the warped wall beside the elevator. Alex swallowed hard. The words still gleamed under the flash, jagged as if scratched in by someone's fingernails across wet cement. He turned around, intending to step back into the elevator, only to realize the door had vanished. There was no door, no control panel, nothing to suggest he had ever been in an elevator at all. Just a cold metal wall, sealed shut as if it had always been there, and the whole elevator ride had only been a hallucination. He touched the wall. It was freezing. The cold from the metal seeped straight into his skin, making his fingers feel numb within seconds. A clicking sound echoed from the right, from behind one of the bunker doors. It was soft, muffled like metal being bent or something trying to unlock the door from the inside. Alex stood motionless. His breath turned into a white mist, drifting through the thick, unmoving air. No wind, no natural light, only the clicking sound, growing closer with every passing moment. He turned and ran down the hallway, his feet sinking into the cold dust like ashes. The walls on either side shrieked as though the space itself was contracting, screaming in the language of the dead. A door at the end of the corridor swung open without a sound, revealing a pitch-black room. From within came a revolting stench, the smell of rust, mildew, and that thick, iron-like scent found only where human flesh has once been torn from bone. Alex stepped back. He didn't want to enter, but the path behind him had vanished. The hallway was no longer there. Only that dark room remained. He stepped inside. The room was empty, except for a large mirror standing in the middle of the floor, as if someone had embedded it into wet cement and left it there. The mirror was old, warped, like a body of water slashed across. When Alex looked into it, the reflection wasn't him. It was another man. The face was identical, but older, with deep-set eyes and a mouth torn wide open to the ears. The man was crying, but the tears didn't fall down his cheeks. They dripped as thick, black drops like rotting blood onto the floor. Alex stepped back, but the man in the mirror didn't move. He kept crying, kept screaming silently, and then a pitch-black hand with long, hook-like nails reached up from the bottom of the mirror, gripped the man's throat, and yanked him into the bottomless void inside the glass. The mirror shattered, not into shards, but into smoke. In an instant, the room vanished. Alex collapsed onto the floor, and when he opened his eyes, he was lying in the elevator. The number 13 button was gone. The control panel had returned to normal, the dim yellow light flickering. But the elevator floor still bore the imprint of dusty footprints. Alex stepped out, shaking with panic. He fled the building that very night, checked into a hotel, and spent the following week researching the history of the building. And he discovered something. In 1947, apartment complex 1432 had been a secret, government-funded psychiatric hospital used to study the effects of psychological isolation. A section of the upper floors had been converted into underground holding cells for subjects deemed uncontrollable, including one unidentified man with pale skin, no mouth, no nose, no eyes. He was listed in the files under the nickname the Mirror Child. It was believed he had the ability to drive anyone who saw him insane, leading them to commit suicide within 4 days. The file had no official seal, just scattered photocopied pages found in an old cabinet at the local library. But those who had lived in the building knew the 13th floor wasn't a place that never existed. It was a place that had been erased from reality. Those who pressed the 13 button were people who shared a resonant frequency with the imprisoned spirit. The 13th floor didn't appear to everyone, only to those who were lonely, mentally fragile, or psychologically scarred. And once they pressed it, they stepped into a floor that no longer belonged to this world. Alex began seeing other things. The mirrors in the hotel would often fog up, and every morning he'd wake to find scratch marks on his chest. When he looked into the mirror, he sometimes saw himself standing behind himself. One morning, he woke to find the hotel window wide open, dust covering the floor, and a single muddy barefoot print right in front of the mirror. He went back to apartment 1432, one last time, bringing gasoline, a lighter, and a camera. His only goal was to find the entrance to the 13th floor, go back there, and destroy it if he could. But he never returned. His camera was found on top of the elevator at the 12th floor, partially burnt but still containing a short piece of footage. In the clip, Alex is standing inside the elevator, staring directly into the lens, his mouth moving but no sound coming out. Behind him, the doors open, not to any floor, but to thick, impenetrable darkness. From within, a pale hand reaches out, grabs his neck, and yanks him backward in an instant. The screen shakes. The last frame shows the elevator doors closing and the number 13 button glowing a vivid red before blinking out. Police got involved. They sealed off the building but found no floor above the 12th. The elevator system was inspected thoroughly. No anomalies, no 13th button, no hallway of ashen dust, and no mirror child in the records of any hospital. Alex's disappearance was filed as unsolved, with the conclusion that he had possibly taken his own life or gone missing voluntarily. But the residents there know. They hear the elevator running at 3 a.m. Sometimes someone vanishes. A student, a newt, or a homeless person looking for shelter. No one sees them leave. But a few nights later, from the highest floor, people hear scratching at the door, wailing echoing down the stairwell. And sometimes, just sometimes, they see a mirror placed in the middle of the hallway, reflecting not themselves, but some other version. Older, more distorted, weeping blood from hollow eyes. If you come to New York and see apartment 1432 listed for rent, remember this one thing. The 13th floor doesn't exist until you believe it does. And when you press that button, you are no longer you. You've just heard one of the most chilling stories about the forgotten horrors buried within the city that never sleeps. If you're still breathing, still in this world, hit subscribe to uncover more terrifying mysteries, where each story is either a warning or a final message from someone who disappeared forever.